Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This session will be a straight-on continuation of where the last seminar recording left off, where the subject of discussion is Nathaniel Branden. That's me. I'm ready for the first question.
Are you aware that after the break, Miss Rand's friends were declaring that professionally and intellectually Nathaniel Branden was finished?
Well, of course, that was Miss Rand's conviction also. This, in a way, is related to the religious attitude that once you're separated from Mother Church, you're kind of in limbo and you can't possibly survive spiritually or any other way on your own. Yes, I heard that, and that made me laugh because I knew, boy, that's going to boomerang and make them look very silly, because I knew my major work was still ahead of me and that my most productive years were still coming. Of course, there are other reasons why that prediction was made. The people who made it, and I know who they are such psychological dependents, so incapable of putting on their own socks without Miss Rand's philosophical guidance, that they probably could not conceive of how anyone who had been as close to Miss Rand as I had been for so many years could walk away from it all and continue to have a productive life. Of course, there's another element involved which is worth commenting on because it says something about the mentality. When it was learned that I was planning to move to Los Angeles and open a practice, and it was known, of course, that my first clients would almost certainly be drawn, or rather that I would hope to draw them from former NBI students, they back in New York predicted failure at that point, because the position was that now that Miss Rand has announced that Nathaniel Branden is a bad boy, no admirer of her work will associate with Nathaniel Branden. And this again, you see, is really the enormous contempt in which Miss Rand holds her own following. And it says something about her distance from reality, that she and the other people there really believed that all that was necessary to cause her admirers never to deal with me again was for her to announce that she disapproved of me and that our relationship had come to an end. So when I heard this, I thought, well, it's good for me that they are talking that way, because it's not going to take very long for that particular prediction to look very silly indeed. You see, when people get angry and they get hysterical, they make mistakes. And they made a lot of mistakes. And I knew that time was on my side. I knew what the truth was, I knew what my future was going to be, and I knew the side of them that was going to become more and more obvious to people now that I was gone. And it's all happened that way. And I knew that people would see it. You know, this issue of contempt for her following is a very unknown aspect of Miss Rand's thinking. But those of us who worked in the office of the objectivist or had daily conversation with Miss Rand know that she had an attitude toward her most passionate admirers that was not very attractive, and that they would not be very pleased to know about. Beginning with the very people who took her side in the intimate New York circle, there is not one of those people who I have not heard spoken of with the most profound contempt on different occasions by Miss Rand, and not one of them who I did not defend against Miss Rand on many occasions, which, from the vantage point of hindsight, I'm tempted to say was my mistake, but that's another matter.
After the article, To Whom It May Concern, there followed a denunciation of you by some of your former associates. Why do you think they did this so quickly and without being aware of your side of the story?
It was only necessary for them to hear Miss Rand's side of the story. There was a graduate student in psychology who was either a client of Alan Blumenthal's or studying with him, I forget which. But he was very interested in my work, and he told Alan Blumenthal that he wanted to go hear what Branden had to say, and was told by Blumenthal that if he did, he would be persona non grata. And the young man said, but I want to hear Branden's side of the story. And Blumenthal replied, after Miss Rand has spoken, there are no sides. That was and is the official attitude. Whenever anyone would try to argue or protest, a favorite answer of Leonard Peikoff's was, Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged, didn't she? That's all you need to know. So that was the general position taken. Then I suppose it was thought that if they expressed themselves negatively too, that would lend support and credibility to Miss Rand's position. And it certainly needed some kind of support, but those people were in no position to provide it.
You stated earlier that you profited enormously from Miss Rand. However, some of Miss Rand's supporters' profit was entirely one-sided, that you were, in effect, riding on the fame of her ideas. What is your view of this?
They're confusing me with themselves. It is they who have no capacity for creativity, no capacity for independence. Here again, I laughed when I heard this because I thought, what are they going to do in the years to follow when I am turning out new books? Will the argument then be that Miss Rand is still secretly ghostwriting them, or that they're no good, or what? I thought, how stupid can you get to make allegations of that kind which will be so readily disproved in the future? Now, as far as Miss Rand herself goes, I want to tell you something. Some parts of this I have no way of proving, but this is the facts as I know them to be. For years, Miss Rand said to many, many friends and acquaintances, everything I know about psychology, I learned from Nathan. She acknowledged any number of times that she knew virtually nothing about psychology until I came into her life, and I had opened up a new intellectual world to her. But there's a postscript to this story. The night that I gave Miss Rand that document, to which I made reference at the close of my article, the famous document, explaining what was not possible between us, and Miss Rand had an explosion. Later, that night, or the next day, I forget which, I said to Barbara Branden, before this story is finished, Ian will be attacking the originality of my work as a psychologist. And Barbara looked at me and said, that's impossible. Whatever else is involved, she's still Ayn Rand. She knows the truth. A week later, I began to hear the stories. It had begun. Now, why was I so sure? Because I had seen many past occasions when Miss Rand would rewrite history. Many past occasions when, if she liked some, they were brilliant and wonderful, and when she didn't like them, they were mediocrities and were pretentious, nothing whatevers. A good case in point was Edith Ephron. Edith Ephron is a brilliantly talented writer who used to be a member of our circle, and there was a break between the circle and Edith Ephron a year or so prior to my break with Miss Rand. Now, at that time, Edith Ephron was working on a novel. For reasons unrelated to this story, she subsequently dropped the project, but that's irrelevant. Now, it was her first novel, but it was spectacularly brilliant literarily. She is an unusually gifted writer, and I hope that one day she will, I won't say turn from her present career as a journalist, but perhaps add to it and go back into fiction. But anyway, Miss Rand read sections of this novel and spoke about it in immensely glowing and complimentary terms. There was no question but that Miss Rand viewed her as a very important literary talent. After with Edith Ephron came, I heard Miss Rand speak very disparagingly of Edith Ephron's literary talents. And I protested, and I said, but Ian, regardless of what your personal quarrel or any of our personal quarrels with Edith may be, don't you remember what you said? Miss Rand denied that she had ever said it. She claimed that she only said that Edith was a potential talent. Now, this is not true, and I know it's not true, and that bothered me enormously. Incidentally, I feel that a very major injustice was done to Edith Efron at that time, and I'm very happy to say that she and I have become friends again, and she and my wife Patricia become friends again, and she and Barbara Branden have become friends again.